You don't just think. You replay. You analyze. You predict. You prepare for conversations that haven't even happened yet. And no one really sees it. They see you being quiet, careful, thoughtful. What they don't see is the 47 alternate scenarios you already ran in your head before sending one simple text. The way you reread a message 5 times. The way you dissect someone's tone. The way a small decision can feel like a life-altering move. You call it just thinking, but it doesn't feel calm. It feels loud. Let's start with something small. You send the message, "Hey, are we still on for tonight?" They don't reply for an hour. Most people shrug and move on. Your mind doesn't. Maybe they're upset. Maybe you said something wrong yesterday. Maybe they're pulling away. Maybe you're too much. Maybe you're not enough. An hour becomes a story. A story becomes a feeling. And that feeling feels real. By the time they reply with, "Sorry, was busy," your body has already gone through tension, doubt, rejection, and relief, all in silence. This isn't random. Overthinking isn't about intelligence. It's not because you're too deep, and it's not because you enjoy stressing yourself out. It's protection. Your brain believes that if it can predict every possible outcome, it can prevent pain. So it scans. It searches for patterns. It looks for subtle shifts in tone. It remembers past mistakes. It connects dots that may not even be there. Because somewhere along the way, unpredictability felt unsafe. Maybe your environment changed quickly. Maybe reactions were unpredictable. Maybe you were misunderstood. Maybe you learned that small mistakes had big consequences. So your brain adapted. It decided, we won't be caught off guard again. And now it runs simulations constantly. Before you speak, you rehearse. Before you decide, you imagine worst-case scenarios. Before you relax, you check for danger. You don't just live moments. You pre-live them. And that's exhausting. Here's something most people don't realize. Overthinking often looks like indecisiveness, but internally it's hyper-responsibility. You think deeply because you don't want to hurt anyone. You calculate outcomes because you don't want to fail. You analyze conversations because you don't want to be misunderstood. You care, so you over-prepare. But caring mixed with fear becomes mental noise. Pause for a second. Think about the last thing you overthought. Was it really about that situation? Or was it about what that situation meant about you? Because that's where it usually goes. Not, did I say the wrong thing? But, what if I'm the wrong kind of person? Not, what if this doesn't work out? But, what if I'm not good enough? Overthinking is rarely about the surface event. It's about identity. It's about the fear that one wrong move will confirm your worst belief about yourself, that you're too much, or not enough, or replaceable, or failing quietly. So your mind tries to stay ahead of judgment. But here's the twist most people miss. Overthinking feels like control. It feels productive, responsible, safe. But it's actually the opposite. The more you try to mentally control the future, the less present you become. You sit in a room physically, but mentally you're 5 conversations ahead. You lie in bed at night, but your mind is revisiting a mistake from 3 years ago. You finally get what you wanted, but instead of relief, you're already scanning for what could go wrong next. It's not that you can't relax. It's that your brain doesn't fully trust calm. Calm feels unfamiliar, and unfamiliar feels risky, so you fill the silence with analysis. There's another layer to this. Many overthinkers are emotionally sensitive. You pick up on tone shifts, micro-expressions, energy changes. You notice what others miss. That awareness is a gift, but without emotional safety, it becomes a burden. Because when you notice everything, you feel responsible for everything. If someone's mood changes, you wonder if it's you. If someone seems distant, you search your memory for mistakes. You don't just experience relationships, you monitor them constantly. And that monitoring keeps you alert. But alertness over time turns into anxiety. Let's pause again. Right now, notice how often your mind is in the future or the past, and how rarely it feels neutral. Overthinking isn't a personality flaw. It's a nervous system that learned to survive by anticipating. It's a brain that believes thinking more equals hurting less. And maybe at one point in your life, that was true. Maybe thinking ahead protected you. Maybe reading the room kept you safe. Maybe analyzing mistakes helped you avoid criticism. But what protects you in chaos can trap you in peace. Because your system doesn't always update when the environment changes. You might not be in that unpredictable space anymore, but your mind still acts like you are. And that's why small things feel big. A delayed reply feels like rejection. A short response feels like disapproval. A mistake feels like exposure. Your mind isn't dramatic, it's cautious. But caution, when constant, becomes noise. And here's the quiet realization. You don't overthink because you're weak. You overthink because you care deeply about outcomes, about people, about how you're perceived, about doing things right. The part of you that replays conversations, it wants connection. The part that predicts worst-case scenarios, it wants safety. The part that struggles to decide, it wants certainty. These aren't broken parts, they're protective parts. The problem is when protection never turns off. Imagine living with a smoke alarm that goes off every time you light a candle. It's doing its job, but the sensitivity is too high. Overthinking is mental sensitivity without a volume control. And once you see it that way, something shifts. Because instead of fighting your mind, you start understanding it. You realize the noise isn't random. It's patterned. It's learned. It's protective. And that awareness alone changes how you relate to it. You stop believing every thought is truth. You start seeing them as attempts to keep you safe. And here's the final thing most overthinkers need to hear. You are not your worst-case scenario. You are not the story your mind creates at 2 a.m. You are not the imagined rejection, the predicted failure, the hypothetical disappointment. You are a person with a very active protective system. That's all. Once you recognize that, something softens. You still think, you still care, you're still observant. But there's a small gap now, a space between the thought and the belief. And in that space, you finally get a little quiet. Not because your mind stopped working, but because you stopped treating every thought like an emergency. And when that happens, even briefly, you realize something powerful. You were never broken. You were just trying to stay safe. And once you see that, you can't unsee it.